Our keynote speaker this morning is a fifth-generation Floridian, third-generation farmer, Adam Putnam. Adam is the CEO of Ducks Unlimited, a nonprofit dedicated to the conservation of wetlands. Ducks Unlimited works to conserve, restore, and manage wetlands and associated habitats for North America's wildfowl, which also benefit other life and people. Adam holds a bachelor's degree in food and resource economics and an honorary Doctor of Laws degree, in addition to serving as the Rodale Fellow at the Aspen Institute. He was also the 2010 E.T. York Distinguished Lecturer at his alma mater of the University of Florida. Adam is a hunter, an angler, conservationist. Notably is an owner of Putnam Groves Incorporated, a family-owned and operated citrus farm and cattle ranch in Central Florida. Please join me in welcoming Adam.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Tim, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Florida. It's Jeff did a great job, I think, of introducing you to our state, that more people think of Mickey and beaches than citrus and cattle, but I feel at home with the citrus backdrop. I appreciate that. Our groves are about 45 minutes from here. I remember when our oldest, I knew that she knew how to read when we were riding down the road, and she recognized a sign that said, Disney World, 20 miles. And the gig was up. We had managed to keep that from her for till she was 5, that she lived so close to Disney, and then we had to break down and take her. But great story about Disney World. St. Joe Paper was the largest landowner in the state, big timber company, but they were in farming, sugar, all kinds of stuff, railroads. And in the late 50s, Walt Disney was looking to build a new park on the eastern half of the United States. And of course, this is really pre-affordable airline travel, so he wanted a place that people could drive to. And he wanted to be in Florida. He really wanted to combine being with the beaches, being close enough to drive to major cities in the southeast. Of course, Florida was substantially undiscovered still at that time, so he knew he could get a lot of land cheap. So he goes to Jacksonville to meet with the CEO of St. Joe Paper, a guy named Ed Ball, who's kind of a legend in Florida land ownership. He's a great entrepreneur. And went to see Mr. Ball, and Mr. Ball had him wait. His secretary took in his lunch, brought an empty plate back out an hour later. Walt Disney's still waiting. After about 4 hours, his secretary came to Mr. Disney in the waiting room and handed him a note and said, "I'm very sorry, Mr. Disney. Mr. Ball will be unable to see you today, but he asked that I give you this note." And Walt opened up the note. He said, "We don't do business with carnival people." So the days of Disney being located in Panama City, in Florida's Panhandle, came to an end, and he came down to Orlando, and the rest is history. It transformed our state. You mentioned that air conditioning made living in Florida possible. I would add less conservation-oriented, but DDT helped as well. It was a pretty tough place. It's a pleasure to be with you. I thoroughly enjoyed working with our partners in conservation as Commissioner of Agriculture in Florida, and continue to work with our partners in conservation as a rancher and a citrus grower not too far from here. If you'd been here 2 weeks ago, you'd have seen these oranges covered in ice. We had really the most severe freeze we've had in about 11 years, and there was some fruit damage, although no tree damage. I'm a child of the 80s, and in the 80s we had massive freezes in 81, 83, 85, and 89, and almost all of them were on Christmas Day. So growing up in the 80s, Christmas was not really associated with a fun time. We were running pumps and watching, in the 89 freeze, 60% of our trees die. It was brutal. So we're kind of glad to bid farewell to the Freezes. Michael and Gretchen are two of the best ambassadors that your organization could have. And I don't just say that because he posed with dead ducks wearing a DU hat. They're highly respected across all organizations, ag associations, conservation organizations, welcomed into the halls of Congress, doing an extraordinary job leading this organization, and certainly Jeremy and Gary and Kim adding to that. You have a really good thing going, and we're proud to be your partner. And I just want to share a few thoughts with you this morning as a former ag commissioner, as a current farmer, and as CEO of Ducks Unlimited about how all of this gels, how we all come together and work together to do really good things. As Michael said, happy Valentine's Day to all of you. What could be more romantic than coming together to discuss soil health? I love you too, honey. Let's talk about some more microbes. I'm often asked, what's the difference between wearing the ag hat and now being in the conservation world? And really, many of you can relate to this because you're wearing an ag hat and a conservation hat as well. The overlap is extraordinary. Sitting in a Farm Bureau meeting as a young farmer and rancher, and sitting in a conservation meeting as CEO of DU, same issues. We live in a society that is now multiple generations removed from the land. So they have no concept of modern agriculture. The notion of soil health, regenerative ag, GPS locators, 24-hour harvesters, satellite technology, completely foreign to the average person. And for those who do think that they understand modern ag, it's almost more dangerous because they have agriculture pigeonholed into this old McDonald's farm mindset that every pig and chicken and cow has a name, and that it is just this small-mindedness that ignores the technology that enables us to both feed the planet and do so in the most sustainable way anywhere on the planet. And so the same really is true in conservation. Multiple generations removed from people who are active in hunting and fishing. Our demographic, for example, of duck hunters, the average age of a duck hunter is in the 60s. So it is the challenges facing ag and conservation in terms of reaching new audiences, reaching new people, growing the tent, making a connection to today's voters, today's policymakers is a challenge, and telling our story. And so this morning, I really want to talk a little bit about partnerships and new ways to tell our story working together. So everything that Ducks Unlimited does, we do on a voluntary basis with our partners. And to illustrate that, I really wanted to show you kind of the track record of our organization. We're 85 years old this year, and really born out of the Dust Bowl, born out of the Great Depression. Our founders led the charge in the depths of the Depression to charge duck hunters $1 to buy a duck stamp, which would have been a radical notion at a time when people were hungry and starving and broke, that you would have to pay extra to go do something that many people believed was their natural-born American right, to go shoot ducks and shoot game to feed their family or for sport, whichever the case may have been at the time. But for many, it was to eat. And so if you look at what we've accomplished in those 85 years, we have exceeded impacting 15 million acres of habitat here in the United States, and then in Canada, and then in the boreal forest of Canada, we keep a separate barometer, and we're over 900 million acres working with our First Nations partners in Canada to protect and conserve the boreal forest, which, for those who are not familiar with the boreal forest, think of ice road truckers. That would be the boreal forest, north of Yellowknife. But This chart to me illustrates the power of partnerships. It took us 20 years as an organization to conserve 1 million acres. Today we conserve 1 million acres approximately every 18 months, and our strategic objective as an organization is to do 1 million acres a year. That wasn't possible really until our partnerships began in the early 90s with conservation districts, with our ag partners, with our public partners, NRCS, North American Wetlands Conservation Act, NACD, which takes the dollar that we raise at a banquet, puts it with 75 cents from a duck stamp, $1 from NACD, $1 from a state wildlife agency partner, so that the dollar that we raise at a raffle at one of our dinners that some of you may have attended becomes $4 or $5 when it's actually deployed on the land. It was partnerships that made that hockey stick bend upward to really make an impact. It's partnerships that allow us to accomplish what we've accomplished. Just so I know my audience, how many of you have ever been to a DU banquet? You've bid on one of those rare 1 of 10,000 edition prints. I tell you, alcohol and firearms have done more to save wetlands than any two things on the planet. It's a magical elixir when it all comes together. When I came in, I was the first non-biologist CEO of DU in the sense that they were looking for someone who had an ag background and someone who had a policy background, because we recognize that our future, as strong as our science team is, our future is in leveraging the power of public policy and leveraging the power of our private working land owners, our farmers and ranchers across North America, to really make an impact on the landscape. And that's how we've been successful. So one of the first things we did was put together an ag strategic plan. What is our strategic focus as an organization to work with more partners on the landscape who are in agriculture, who are active farmers and ranchers, to continue to make a difference? And we have sought your leadership's input, along with Farm Bureau and National Cattlemen's and others, to make sure we're getting it right. Because we can't be successful for wetlands and waterfowl, we can't be successful for conservation if America's farmers and ranchers are not also successful. The definition of sustainability has to begin with economic sustainability, or none of the other things are going to come into play. Another example of our partnerships, and one that we like to highlight a great deal, is our rice stewardship project. Rice and ducks go pretty well. Rice is an important source of calories for much of the world. We began this program in 2013. It was funded with Farm Bill dollars, which require us to match along with the industry. This is an example of a successful partnership that has conserved over 700,000 acres of rice habitat, working with farmers and ranchers mostly in the Delta, but also in the Central Valley of California. This equates to essentially 1 in 4 rice acres in the United States that has benefited from this program. Again, all voluntary, all incentive-based, making production practice adjustments that leave that food for those migrating waterfowl in a way that's also good for these rice producers' bottom lines. This works for brand new rice farmers. This works for 5th generation rice growers. This is just one example of how we have to scale our impact. It's not enough in this, if we're going to make an impact on the landscape, we have to scale it to landscape. And hitting 728,000 acres is an example of scaling the impact. Another example, working with our partners in South Dakota, Beetle County. Anybody here from Beetle County Conservation District? This is where we signed our MOU with National Association of Conservation Districts. This is a 310-acre farm that Ducks Unlimited purchased. We're in the process of using it now as a demonstration farm, an education facility, to bring growers in to show them the different types of practices and how that impacts yields in soil health, in regenerative ag. This is the tool that we're using on the prairies to demonstrate the work that we think keeps these farms profitable in a way that is better for soil health and ultimately better for wetlands as well. When we complete our restoration, this will be turned over to the local conservation district. They will own and manage this demonstration farm. This is another example of a partnership between DU and an individual conservation district that I think is illustrative of what we can do across North America. This is, again, NRCS is a key partner, the Conservation District's a key partner. There has to be local buy-in from the farmers or it doesn't work. And over the last several years, we've hired as many agronomists and soil scientists as we have waterfowl biologists. That's the direction that the world is moving if we're going to continue to make an impact. In some ways, as we've seen the Extension Service beset by budget cuts and stressors on those agencies, as a kid who I consider myself a land-grant baby, grew up in 4-H, went to a land-grant school, got my ag degree, depend on ag research for my farm. In many ways, your districts, our organization, other NGOs are stepping into the old extension agent role that used to come from USDA, but we're seeing that footprint diminish, and we're filling that gap, all of us together. And this is only going to grow in terms of the need for us to fill that vacuum. We see it in the state, local, and federal level, the pressure being put on what we used to call the county agents. Again, all of these are voluntary and incentive-based. We live in a world where sustainability, and Jeremy, it's kind of cool to see the definition put up in front of us, but this sustainability is more than a buzzword. It can feel like a buzzword, because if you've been around agriculture for very long, you've seen plenty of other people in multiple iterations of the Farm Bill try to impose some new theme on American agriculture. Sustainability is not a theme. It's here to stay. It will be ingrained in how we have to change our production practices. And in part, it's being driven particularly by the supply chain partners, this notion of ESG, environment, social governance. And these companies up and down the supply chain are making public commitments, either because they want a green halo, they want a nice headline, or they're feeling pressure from their investors, or their customers, or their shareholders to make these commitments that then somebody else has to go figure out how they're going to actually achieve them. I view your organization, our organization, as the interpreters for the pressure that farmers and ranchers across the country are feeling to hit these ESG objectives that are being put out in a press release before anybody actually talks to the farmers and ranchers who are supposed to help them accomplish those metrics. And we have to separate as interpreters, conservation districts and DU employees and agronomists and soil scientists, those things that farmers are capable of accomplishing and still having a healthy bottom line to pass that farm down to the next generation, so that we're not just engaged in press release science. And as of the moment, there are a lot of different iterations of this ESG up and down the supply chain. And farmers are feeling the pinch. Farmers are feeling the pressure. Farmers have yet to really benefit economically from differentiating their production practices from those who are not following the most conservation-oriented production practices. That has to change. They have to be rewarded for being better performers in a commoditized world. And until we figure that part out, none of this is going to work, and it won't move past the press release stage of the science. And that's where you and I come into this. We have to be the interpreters to help farmers and ranchers who are plenty busy feeding the world accomplish these new objectives. The biggest difference, as I see it, between previous themes that people have tried to impose on a farm bill and the sustainability commitment that we find ourselves in today is that in the past, the Farm Bill substantially asked farmers to choose. You can be a farmer or you can be a conservationist. You can mothball your land or you can continue to feed the planet. This is not about making the choice between one or the other. This is not black and white. It's not a toggle on or off. This is about a hybridization of continuing to grow and produce and generate income and feed the planet, but doing it in different ways. And in some ways, that's actually more difficult than the old way, which was to have as high a yield as you possibly can, do whatever it takes to hit your biggest numbers that you possibly can, set a new record, or set it aside. In some ways, this is far more difficult because you're asking growers to do both, to marry up those two objectives. And that's why the role of conservation districts and NGOs like DU is more important than ever. Those partnerships require all of us to look beyond the usual choir in who we are partnering with. We're all pretty good at talking to farmers and ranchers. We're all pretty good partners with the various ag associations, but it requires us to broaden that. And an example for that that we're engaged in is with Mississippi River's Cities and Towns Initiative, which runs the length of the Mississippi, which is what we would also call the Mississippi Flyway in duck world. But our partnership now is not only with the farmers and ranchers, not just with rice growers, but with the mayors who are turning to agricultural practices to solve their flooding problems or their Tier 3 wastewater treatment issues using green infrastructure or natural infrastructure, restoring wetlands, recharging those wetlands instead of building another concrete plant. That's a whole new set of partnerships that we are engaged in that we think are important. It's a little out of the ordinary, a little outside our comfort zone. We're all trying to get used to one another. But that's the world we find ourselves in, this ESG world, the sustainability world where we have to reach a new audience and select new partners who need us and we need them, and we have to spend a little more time getting to know one another and how we can work together to accomplish our conservation objectives. So mayors, in addition to working lands owners, in addition to our tremendous partnerships with USDA. And I would add another example of a new partnership that we've engaged in is right here in our backyard. We recently partnered with the University of Florida, go Gators, on one of the largest gifts to a land-grant institution ever. It's about 45 minutes south of here in the big city of Yeehaw Junction. It's called the DeLuca easement. It is citrus groves, native forage for cattle, some improved pasture for cattle. It's home to the largest known colony for grasshopper sparrows, a tremendously endangered species, as well as red-cockaded woodpecker, black bears, panthers cross here. Again, 45 minutes south of Disney, 27,000 acres. Ducks Unlimited holds the conservation easement on this property. The University of Florida holds title to the property. It will be used for research for undergraduates and graduates, activities for the public, including 4-H and other organizations. It will continue to be used to demonstrate real-world production practices so that Florida farmers and ranchers have a 27,000-acre test bed so that things that may sound good in the lab or look good in the classroom have to actually be tested to be deployed when it comes to best practices for conservation. The way that our partnerships work is that the value of this donation to DU can be used as match to draw down other federal funds and state funds to do other conservation projects across the state. And so it has already, just in the just over a year that we've had it, been able to draw down over $7 million in match that have gone to other conservation projects around the state, working with our conservation district partners in the state of Florida. That's an example of a different type of partnership with higher education. All of us have to find new ways to tell this story. Growing up, I heard it 1,000 times in 4-H and Farm Bureau and the Cattlemen's Association. There's always somebody coming in saying, you've got to tell your story better. You've got to open up the gates of your farms or your ranch and bring in people, bring in elected officials who've not grown up on a farm. We keep telling each other that, and the challenge grows ever more important every year that we're another generation removed from the landscape. And all of us face this as farmers and ranchers, as conservation districts, as duck hunters, telling that story. The duck hunters have conserved and been responsible for the nesting and breeding of millions more ducks than they've ever imagined shooting in any one season or in a lifetime of seasons. But to the layperson who's not a duck hunter, they find that hard to believe. They say, well, you're just trying to save ducks to shoot ducks. You're missing the point. And the same is true in agriculture. The same is true in ranching. And that's why all of us have to continue to work to find new ways to reach new audiences. In Ducks Unlimited, we've started 160 collegiate chapters organizing colleges and universities around the country, which has been a boon to us as an organization, because not only are we putting a stake in the ground in higher ed and on college campuses around really controversial items like duck hunting and which necessarily involves firearms. We don't use slingshots to duck hunt. On college campuses, that kind of creates some discomfort for some of the faculty, but they've been wildly successful, and it has actually generated our talent pipeline, where now 12% of our workforce began in one of our collegiate chapters. So we're capturing them young, and we're under no illusion that all of the members of all of those 160 chapters are going to grow up and spend the rest of their lives duck hunting. Some portion of them will. But we've created a positive peer experience where they're leaving college as voters and citizens, and some of them are going to become elected officials who have a positive image of the role that conservation plays in the hunting community and the essential role that Ducks Unlimited plays in that conservation space. And so it's really much bigger than just trying to grow more people who are going to one day buy a duck stamp. It's about growing a more educated, enlightened electorate who understands the essential role that conservation plays in feeding the planet and having the type of country that we want to hand off to our children. Podcasts, corporate sustainability, working in that ESG world. This is all so essential, and that's frankly the best example for why this matters so much is right here in Florida, where legislation was filed to disband all conservation districts. That's why we tell this story, so that we don't have to play defense, that we have an educated electorate who understands the essential role that you play, that we play, that all of us play in what's going on. It's pretty remarkable, in my view, that you think about how uniquely American what you do is. The idea of putting yourself on a ballot, holding yourself out there for something that, last time I checked, doesn't pay too good, creates hundreds of hours or thousands of hours away from your family, away from your business, to try to leave your community a little stronger, a little better than you found it, to push big rocks up steep hills, to change behavior, to educate people, to leave the water a little cleaner, to leave the soil a little healthier, and to be able to find that balance, to be able to do those things and still feed the planet, to create stronger rural communities. That's uniquely American, what you are a part of. We have a very strong partnership with Ducks Unlimited Canada, but it's different. People aren't as philanthropic. They don't give to their church or give to the Boy Scouts or give to the Ducks or give to whatever the way that Americans do. They don't attract 50,000 volunteers to an organization like Ducks Unlimited does. But that's just one example. There's thousands of organizations. Your hospital, the Boys and Girls Clubs, the Scouts, any of them, the Art Museum. All of those ideas, de Tocqueville described this 200 years ago, and it is as relevant today as it was then. It is uniquely American, and you are leaders in that uniquely American journey. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you for that. And as we try to attract the next generation, one of the things that we've invested in is an IMAX film to reach even younger students. We have 160 college chapters, but this is to reach the 10-year-old. And so we partnered with Audubon, Ducks Unlimited Canada, and the McGraw Wildlife Institute to create a film that's about lots of things. It's about clean water. It's about the importance of the American prairies. It's about the role that farmers play on that landscape to feed the planet and take care of it. And it's told through the eyes of 3 distinct species of birds: the crane, the warbler, and of course, the duck. And so if you would indulge me, I'd like to show you a trailer for this film, which will be coming to a theater near you, a children's museum, Museum of Science and Industry near you. And I believe that it helps to tell all of our story, the conservation story, about how we're all in it together and how all of us working together can leave the world a better place.
From the heartland of North America comes the story of a hidden paradise. Discover a wetland oasis vital to millions of birds. Fly alongside the epic migrations of these remarkable creatures as they return home to raise the next generation.
Is this real life or make-believe? You are the wind underneath my wings. You got me higher than I've ever been. When I'm with you, I'm flying. When I'm with you, I'm flying.
Meet the diverse wildlife that all play a part in this bountiful ecosystem.
When I'm with you, I'm flying. When I'm with you, I'm flying.
And join the inspiring people working to protect it.
When I'm with you, I'm flying.
Soar across the prairie wetlands and learn why we all need wide open spaces to spread our wings.
When I'm with you, I'm flying.
Narrated by me, Michael Keaton. Coming soon.
I'm pretty excited about this. When that bird was coming in, I could hear Michael say, get ready, take him. This is just one example of what we can do together. And we are so excited to have a memorandum of understanding and a strong working relationship in Washington and across the states. But I'm here to personally ask for your continued help in each of your individual districts to identify those places where we can continue to work together, to strengthen those relationships with farmers and ranchers, to protect our wetlands, feed the planet, interpret this new chaotic, to steal from Jeremy's terminology, to interpret this chaotic sustainability world that farmers and ranchers are once again being asked to solve a lot of problems and still be sure and feed the world and try to make a buck here and there so that they can pass their farm or their ranch to the next generation. We are all in this together, and we're better off for the passion and the sacrifice and the dedication that you have for the districts, that we have for conservation collectively, and at the same time doing it in a way that maintains America's food security. God bless you for what you do, and we're your partners in each and every one of those endeavors. Thank you very much.